All right. Well, good morning or good afternoon to all of you. On behalf of Library Makers, I would like to welcome you to the Storytime Tinkering Book Club. Um, my name is Karen, and I'm a librarian from the San Diego Public Library. So just wanted to give you a little bit of information on Library Makers. Library Makers is a community that connects and supports library staff from all over the country in libraries big and small who are all at different points in their maker journey. Whether you are just getting started or you have been making for many years, we invite you to ask questions and to share your experiences on our librarymakers.org platform. And now I'd like you to introduce the really awesome team at the Tinkering Studio, an R&D laboratory for creative learning at the Exploratorium, a museum of science, art, and human perception located in San Francisco, California. We have with us today Karen Wilkinson, Steph Muscat, and Michael Wong, who will lead our session today. So I'll hand it over to you all.
Thanks so much, Karen. And we're really happy to be back with you all. Just out of curiosity, can you indicate whether or not, were you here for the previous session? Or is this a new, was anyone here for the past book club session, or is this new to everybody? It's great either way. Okay, we've got Jonna was here. First timer. Okay, this is good. We have a combination. So I'll give you a little bit of background on what we're trying out here. And then Michael and Karen will also explain a little bit more. But just to say, welcome. Thank you to those of you who showed up last time and wanted to join in again. Also, thank you to those of you who are joining for the first time. And I'll pass it to Michael to explain a little bit about who we are, and then Karen will share the overall idea of this book club.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Steph. And yeah, lovely to see folks coming in from everywhere. So I'm Michael. I work with Steph and Karen Wilkinson. And as Karen from San Diego introduced us, we are from the Exploratorium, which is a museum of art, science, and human perception. We're located in San Francisco, and we would love it if you would come and visit us if you haven't already. We are housed within one of the piers along the Embarcadero, and within this giant building of fun exhibits, we have a space that's called the Tinkering Studio. And the Tinkering Studio is both a physical space where we're able to test some ideas on the floor and facilitate some activities, but it's also the name of our team. There are 12 of us at the moment, and we engage in a wide range of different types of research and development, developing tinkering activities. We also facilitate experiences like this, but also in-person experiences and professional development experiences. And a large part of what we do is also focused around dissemination, so sharing the ideas that we're thinking about with a wider audience, again, similar to this. Maybe I'll quickly touch on what we define as tinkering before I pass on to Karen. So to us, tinkering is a pedagogical approach. So it's a way that we believe people can learn. And we define tinkering as a hands-on, playful learning experience with phenomena. So phenomena are those things that can be seen, touched, and explored. I also just want to note that we really deeply believe that tinkering is for everyone because it builds upon prior experiences that you're going to bring into the space and into the experience. And it leverages things that you already know. So it's a unique experience for each individual, and we believe everyone can show up fully for it. Karen, I'll pass it over to you.
Thanks, Michael. So I think the only thing I would really add is the idea for this book club and where it originated. And I have to give props to Steph and the other Karen from San Diego, that really came up with this idea to create a book club, but sort of a twist on the idea of a book club, which was to take a children's book or a series of books as a launching off point. We're working on a project right now using an app called Octo Studio that working with the lifelong kindergarten group at the Media Lab. And we're particularly interested in this idea of multiple literacies. Visitors to the Exploratorium get this chance to immerse themselves with materials. That's something that's at the heart of all of our tinkering experiences. So this idea of multiple literacies, we're expanding it a little to include basic literacies and digital literacies, but also squeeze in this materials literacies, working with your hands with physical things, and hoping through this book club that we'll use your expertise in books and libraries and making in your spaces, along with our interest in the computation side of things and materials, and have 3 different ways that people could come to enter something, whether it's through a book, through materials, or through computation. And so we're going to try 3 small experiments to see how many ideas we can generate around those. And really, it's about doing this in ways, we're really concentrating on P3, so preschool to 3rd grade, but see this as intergenerational opportunities for families, for older youth to work with younger youth around stories, around creating, and around computation. So we're just really delighted to be here with you again and see where today goes. So thanks. Also, I'll say a thank you too for being here and being part of this.
Great. Thanks, Karen. So the plan for today is, first, we would love to hear a little bit about what brought you here and what your experience with making and books and maybe combining making and books is, just because for us, this is an opportunity for us to learn a little bit about how book-based tinkering might work in different contexts. And then we'll spend some time talking about this book. So this was our first book club book selection, which is Don't Push the Button. And I know a couple of people, at least in the room, have had a chance to tinker with it. So if you've had a chance, we would love to just hear what you tried, what worked, what didn't, what you would want to do next. And then we'll introduce our next theme for the book club. So with that, we'd love to start just by hearing a little bit more about you and who's in the room. So if you don't mind sharing who you are and your role and where you're coming from, and just a little bit about what brought you here today. I'm happy to start. I'm Steph. I work at the Tinkering Studio doing hands-on activity design and development. And I'm really interested in how books can be sparks for inviting people into hands-on learning who maybe don't necessarily see themselves as scientists or as engineers, but really see narrative and storytelling as an invitation in. And maybe I'll pass it to Karen from San Diego.
Hi, I'm Karen from San Diego. I work at the San Diego Public Library on the Public Technology Services team, and we oversee the maker space here. So there's a lot of making going on. Prior to this, I was an elementary school librarian, so I love picture books, love reading them, love sharing them. So the connection between picture books and making, I think it's a perfect combination because it really does invite everyone in, not just the young kids, but all ages, inviting them in to be creative and to be imaginative. All right, yeah, I'm gonna pass it to Trisha.
I'm Trisha Hutcherson. I'm the Youth Services consultant for the Oklahoma Department of Libraries. So I don't have just one library right now. I have a whole state. And I recently also came from an elementary school library where we did a lot with books and connecting literature to making. And so this is exciting for me to be here. Okay, let's see. How about BHML Youth? I see you, but I don't know what your name is.
Hi, sorry. I'm Jen. I'm from Booth Bay Harbor Memorial Library. We're a very small library in Maine. I am the children's coordinator here. And right now, my group is really, really young. And I've done a lot of, I do a lot of process art and creating, but I'm definitely interested in this group to learn more ideas and to kind of expand and grow into programs with older kids. All right, and I guess, who can I pass it to? Gosh, I'm not sure. Ivan.
Hi, my name is Ivan. Ivan, I can go by Ivan
sorry.
also. Okay. I work in a library in San Francisco Bay Area. I run a makerspace here, and and really glad to get my hands on some books and start tinkering and playing with Octa Studio also, which is a new app for us. We're really big, heavy Scratch users in our makerspace, so can't wait to get Octa Studio going.
And maybe Yvonne, do you want to pass it to someone else? Or I can
Yeah,
nominate.
yeah, Katrina's right next to me on my screen. So, oh,
Oh, great. Thanks, Katrina, for adding your introduction. Yeah, feel free to introduce yourself in the chat if you're not able to speak right now. But that's great to hear that you do a lot of technology and makery programming in the library.
you know, pick the next one, or should Jonah?
Jonna, are you able to speak right now? It's okay if not. If not, let's have Michael. Why don't you? Okay.
No, that's fine. Don't worry about like the chat also works great. So feel free to use the chat freely throughout this. Yeah, thanks, Steph. I am Michael. I did a little bit of an intro of what I do, and it also overlaps a lot with what Steph does. But yeah, based at the Tinkering Studio, love doing a lot of R&D. I think everything that people have been saying about the connections with books and making, I really resonates with me. Maybe one thing I would add is slightly more personal is like, I love the idea of being able to take a book that you deeply engage with. Like I remember a lot of books were really formative for me as a kid. And then being able to like add to it in the like through physically playing with the characters or through the phenomena. So that's something that really engages me when we're talking about the connection between books and tinkering and making. And maybe I will pass it to Karen, or actually Pamela.
Hi all, glad to be here. I'm delighted. You know, I was able to go to the Tinkering Studio and see some of this work and all the playfulness with it. And I am just, I buy picture books for myself. I mean, I love picture books because I love art and they're always filled with art and they always have a fun or engaging story. And my kids always make fun of me because sometimes they're so touching. I cry when I'm reading them and they all laugh at me. But picture books are close to my heart. And also is hands-on making. And I just think it's like a really human to connect with things through story. So when I learned of this project, I know I kept emailing Karen saying, you've got to come and talk to the library makers because this is so perfect for what our people do every day, especially the story times, which are numerous in libraries everywhere in this country. And this can be such a great synergy. So I'm delighted that you're here. Thank you so much. It's a perfect fit. So.
Karen, will you introduce yourself?
Sure. Yes, Karen again, and I'm reading things, and it's great, Bernadette, for several reasons. We've also done some Lego tinkering things, so we need to talk about that too at some point. But I think for me, it's really a really nice opportunity to connect specifically with library folks and see. I mean, I'm very interested in like up in Maine, in rural Maine, how do you find ideas? How do you develop them yourself, and how do you share them with other librarians? And I think this library makers community is of real interest to us for that reason, because we come from a museum, an informal learning organization too, and there's so much learning that goes on outside of schools that can connect potentially and motivate students and their families, you know, in a different way. So very excited.
Yeah, thank you all for introducing yourselves. And I want to make sure, Amy, did you want to introduce yourself out loud? You're also very welcome to introduce yourself in the chat. Oh, great. Thank you. Yeah, I love hearing about your ways into thinking about your programming and all the different age ranges and the audiences that you're all mentioning. Thank you for sharing, because it's useful for us to have an understanding of your context and why this work might be relevant to you. And with that, I would love to invite anyone who has tinkered with Don't Push the Button and wants to share what they tried. And I'm going to invite maybe Karen from San Diego to start, because I know that you have a project, but if anyone else has a project, you can just be thinking and arranging materials. But I'd love to hear what you've been working on.
Sure. So I took a very low tech approach. Last time I shared paper circuits, so I kind of stayed with that material, paper. So I just did a little booklet, kind of folded it zine style. So I made a little template here. You can see it says welcome to, and then you can add your name. There's only one rule, don't push the button. So it really mimics the book. And then when you open it, you can add like what happens. And then, oh, don't push it again. And then you can add what happens next. And then, that was fun. Let's do it again. So again, really mimicking the input output of the book and the very simple, like tactile nature of it. So I actually did this as a mini story time with our interns, and they are all young adults, so ranging from like 18 to like 20s. We sat in a circle. I read to them the book. We had a lot of fun with the book. They loved the book. And then afterwards, they made their own books with the template I gave them. So yeah, I made some slides, and I'll just share with you the books that they made. So let me share my screen. Right. So again, this is like the template I made, and then I showed them how to fold it zine style. And so the first book here, so they made it like it's a rainy day after you press the button. And then what happens if you push it again? It rains cats and dogs. I really like this one because she really tried to make different types of dogs too, and types of cats as well. So yeah, it was really fun to see what she came up with. And then I have a couple more. This is Ylissa's book. So hers drawn from like the springtime. So we have a little cocoon there and a little birdie. And then when you press it again, what do you think might happen? Oh, a butterfly comes from the cocoon. And then our last one, Amir's book. So he was really like, when he was thinking of the button, he thought of Minions first, because Minions, I guess they have a lot of buttons that they deal with. That's the moon in the corner. And then what happens if you push it again? And then, so again, we had a lot of fun with this. It was low tech, but you can still pretty open, like open-ended, and you can still really play a lot with it. So that was my project.
Yeah, thanks so much for sharing, Karen. I really love both seeing all of the different examples of how people took the same zine material that you had made and then made it their own. And also what you're saying about the low tech way into the book. Like, it just feels like tinkering with the book means you get to invent your own directions. And this is a really nice example of that. So thanks for sharing. Yvonne, would you be willing to share what you've been tinkering with Don't Push the Button? Oh, you're muted right now.
I got a different book actually, because I missed last one. So I picked a book that I had available for me. So I kind of tinkered a little bit. I'm on it, and I kind of created a little something on Octo Studio. I can share it. Let me share my screen quickly.
Yeah, and this brings up a good point too. We're hoping if you all have other books that you love and that you think would be interesting to tinker with, that you'll share them with us. So thank you, Yvonne, for bringing in one already.
Yeah, so this is just Octa Studio, and it's just the goat, the main character of the book. And if you tap it, and he's on it, and so the possibility is because in the book he's on it, he's above it, he's next to it, so you can change as you tap. Oops, as you tap the goat, different places that it goes. Yeah, that's it.
Can you show
That's
the
all it
code blocks? Yeah. So
Yeah.
because I'm
Mhm.
not sure everyone has seen Octa Studio. So this is when we talk about Octa Studio, it's this block-based coding program for mobile devices. And so you can see Yvonne has dragged up these code blocks and connected them to make a program. So yeah, can you play it and we can see different parts will light up as the code is working.
And the on is a different sprite.
Oh, nice.
And then it hides again.
Yeah, so you're using the show and the hide, and then I like that glow with the on, where it really makes it.
I overuse the glow, I confess.
Ivan, could I ask, how did you make the on? Like, is that like a font that you found?
No, I drew over the font. The font was too skinny.
Oh, cool.
So I
I love
just
that.
used my finger,
Yeah, like customizing. That's really cool.
customize it. Yeah. Yeah. Love the book, love goats, and I love the playfulness interaction. And the story is a great story. So I just I think the story gives you the idea of what to do, and I think I love that. And I found other great books on the catalog, but they were checked out. So this was available, so I checked it out to myself. So yeah, that's it. That's all I want to share.
Thank you for sharing. I like both of you, both Karen and Yvonne, you shared examples of kind of taking the book and moving it in a new direction, one low tech and one with code. So it's really cool to see that contrast. Yeah. With that, did anyone else have a chance to tinker with this book or with another book between last session and this session for those who were here? It's okay if you didn't.
So
Yeah.
I tinkered with Don't Push the Button, but I have really little kids. So my kids are like 2 and 3. So I just put out a variety of materials to actually create the button. So they created a button and then we played Don't Push the Button. And so they thought about what they were going to do if someone pushed their button, and it was hilarious. They had an absolute ball. And the sponge was the favorite because it's actually squishy.
So cute.
So, but we used a variety of different materials. So very, very low tech, but super fun.
So was it like a series of things like that with different materials that they could?
Yeah.
What a good idea.
Yeah. So they could like choose and create their own button. So we did kind of the creating, and then we all played around with the buttons and pushing each other's buttons and doing different things.
I really love that the feeling of pressing a button is something that we've noticed comes up with that book. And I feel like the way that you set that up is one of the clearest examples. Like it really makes you think about how a button feels. That's cool. Did anyone else have a don't push the button tinkering project they wanted to share? Well, we have a few. Oh, I see. Trisha, what do you say? A connection with idioms, like pressing my buttons?
I think it would be fun to explore that too with kids who are a little bit older because they love idioms.
Yeah, and a lot of like for language learning, idioms are really like they're just such great ways to make that go intergenerationally too. Really nice and funny.
Well, we have just a few other Don't Push the Button projects that we tried out and that some of our partners tried. So we wanted to show a few of them, but thank you for sharing what you've been trying, because I already have all sorts of new ideas. So for Don't Push the Button, I love, Jen, that you are bringing up this idea of what buttons feel like. So one of our partners named Casey was trying out doing a read aloud with this book with 12 toddlers. And she said the toddlers all really wanted to just run up to the book and touch the book and press the button on the book. And even though she gave them red paper buttons to each have, that wasn't enough. They really needed to touch the book. So I feel like what you came up with the different buttons to press could be a really nice answer to that. But anyway, so she was just thinking about, okay, how do you do a read aloud and invite people in to start playing with buttons? And then Casey also tried out doing some paper circuits. So I don't know if any of you have done paper circuits before, but playing with a battery, LEDs, and copper tape to start making characters from the book and bringing them to life. So this is a Larry that was made out of paper and then using some lights. And I wanted to bring this one in because it's just what we were talking about with the feeling of a button. So there was a child that she was working with who thought that the paper buttons weren't squishy enough and asked for a ketchup packet so that they could make a squishy button with the LED. So I love that one. And then Karen, do you want to share a little about this?
Sure. Yeah, I have to send out some love to Sarah. This is a plushie that Sarah Baldock made that I just love for button pushing, thinking of paper circuits and sewn circuits. So, you can make your own Larry. Light up Larry.
So cute.
And then related also to sewn circuits, this is a different kind of book, but the DALL-E 1.0 is a really a nice one to connect with take aparts and circuits. And then making a few example projects. This is one that I made trying to make basic switches out of things. So it kind of combines our topic that we're going into with the topic of pushing a button. So the light up Larry is putting tracing paper over the screen and drawing Larry. And then a cardboard homemade switch, and did a few students 8 to 12. But that was fun to use foil as for connections.
Oops, sorry. It's always hard to do the switching the thing. Let's see. Did that work? No. Interesting. Okay, there we go.
And here's one, this is making paper buttons and having just that it works. You could tap the screen too, but this uses something inside of OctaStudio, which is when tap makes something happen. So the Larry on the screen is just advancing over and over again, and you're trying to jump over Larry by pressing the button. And then Larry will go faster and faster, making it more and more challenging. But then, this was something that surprised us. Paper on the screen will work. And we use this foamies materials a lot, and it won't. So we were kind of playing with buttons that worked and buttons that don't work and making, anyway, but just pressing things on the screen. And then that one, you could have that really press back feel. Yeah. So, kind of like a sponge.
There's something I just really like about seeing the hand-drawn elements next to a screen. I feel like you don't always get to see that combination.
And then this one, the idea was, so this is taking pictures directly out of the book. But the thing that I would want to point out here is this is a beam feature. So you can make a program from one device, trigger something to happen on another device. But the egg carton was a physical remote control that Willa was making and then decided to turn it into something on the phone. So turn that into a beam project. So there are 3 different buttons that trigger 3 different actions on the other device. That's kind of magical when you can make things happen. And that one is in very close proximity, but we also found out that you can beam through a wall or across a room, which kind of surprised us.
Yeah, thank you to everyone who shared Don't Push the Button project. I just love seeing how like one book took us in a lot of different directions. And I want to make sure we have a minute to wrap this part up. So are there any like comments or questions about Don't Push the Button and the explorations we all just were doing before we move on to introduce our next theme? Oh, and we have a new puppy friend who joined us.
Seeing these examples, and also Jen, your instance of how you facilitated this with young learners, like we've been playing around with different materials, like similar to Karen, that like activate, on an iPad screen through touching, but also those materials that give that button-esque feedback. And I think it's worth just paying attention to. I think it's something we have been doing somewhat subconsciously or without like really clear intention of trying to replicate that nice tactile feel of the button. But hearing all of these examples is making me think that it's something we should pay a lot more attention to in the tinkering studio and be, clearer with what materials we love to get feedback from.
Well, we are also very excited for what's coming up next, which is a theme. So this first book club was an experiment in looking at one book. Now we're really curious about what happens if we introduce a theme to you all and see what directions everyone goes in, knowing that you might not all have the same access to the same books. And so this might kind of free us up to bring in your favorite books or books that you have access to. So we're really hoping to focus on light and shadow, knowing that this might be a challenge because setting up a space where you can explore light and shadow isn't always easy in a big public space where it's maybe really bright and you can't turn lights off. And so anyway, we know that this is a question mark and we're just really curious to see where you go with it. But some of our favorite books around light and shadow are on this slide. So there's a book called Flashlight, Everything Has a Shadow Except Ants, Duck Rabbit, Moon Bear's Shadow, and Shadowville. These aren't even all of them, but these are just a few that today we're going to introduce just some ideas about how you might start thinking about tinkering with light and shadow and different books. So Karen, will you start us off thinking about how we approach light and shadow?
Yeah, well, this kind of is just the natural Exploratorium way to think about things. So Steph introduced some books, and we always think of authors, but also artists' work. So Kumi Yamashita has a piece that's actually being installed this week that'll be up over the summer, but she's a shadow artist. And this particular piece is called Origami, and it's folded and crinkled in such a way where you get these profiles. It's very beautiful. She's someone we included in our book called The Art of Tinkering. And then Vincent Ball is an artist that draws a lot with objects and shadows. And Steph will be sharing an inspired tinkering activity about that. But you can really check out his work. He's constantly uploading things to his Instagram page, but very humorous illustrator from the UK. I mean, sorry, from the EU.
Belgium.
Yeah, Diane Landry is a Canadian artist, and this piece was in our summer show a few years back. And what I love about this is it's mechanically moving a flashlight in and out, but the in and out is a laundry basket with green soda bottles, pop bottles, whichever you call them, attached to it. And you get this mandala that grows on the wall and shrinks. So everyday objects with flashlights create stunning shadows. And then, oh, do you want me to say something about Shadowville too?
Yeah, because you have the example, if you don't mind.
Okay. Well, I mean, this is a great book with silhouettes. So making cutouts and puppets, if you're going to make physical ones, but would also be, the story would be a lot of fun to animate inside of Octo Studio. We do quite a few things with LEDs and lights with shadow making, some with more sophisticated things like CPX and microcontrollers, to regular cardboard and flashlights. So yeah, the range is always fun. And this is not a storybook, but one we thought we would just include. This is a collection that comes from Reggio Emilia. They have preschools in that region in Italy. And this phrase, this statement came from a child. And they do these beautiful noticings, but the book is filled with drawings that relate to activities, making and tinkering activities that they've done with children all across the region. And it's something that they work with really young children for over time, if you're not familiar with them. So kids start drawing and drawing some pretty sophisticated things. That's what's really striking to me about the book, is you see understanding of light and shadow from drawings that are made by 3, 4, and 5-year-olds that I say rival like our understanding of light and shadow, my understanding of light and shadow as an adult. It's pretty special. And this is just, this is actually a light block that Steph made, that trying things out in some preschool classrooms, red, green, and blue lights. And then, yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, feel free to add. All of us have a lot of thoughts on these books because we all love them. So I should say Michael and Karen and anyone else who's familiar with them, please chime in too. But this is a book, Flashlight, which I really love because it doesn't have any words. And so it's a different kind of book. It's all told through images, and it's just these really lovely illustrations that get you thinking about noticing a light and noticing shadow. And this is a project that Casey, the collaborator I mentioned earlier, made, where she was using Octo Studio. And there's a feature in Octo Studio where you can tilt the phone and have, in this case, the flashlight is moving based on how she's tilting the phone back and forth. And then when it comes into contact with these other characters, they light up. So they were using glow, just like Yvonne. I think she also likes glow. And here's some of the code and what it looks like. So there are these different blocks, and she was really using the when touches block, so that when the flashlight touches one of the other characters, something happens. So I wanted to share a connection between the book and then an Octo Studio project. So another book we really like that does not necessarily seem like a light and shadow book at first is called Duck Rabbit. It's kind of goofy. It basically, the whole book is arguing back and forth about whether this image on the screen is a duck or is a rabbit. Yeah, and Michael's holding up a copy of the book. So you can see, truly, it's just going through the book and back and forth, duck or rabbit. We, based on Vincent Ball's artwork, do this activity called Shadow Remix. So in this case, you have Vincent Ball's take on a clothespin on the left, which is a rabbit. And on the right, one of our coworkers, Ryoko, has made a clothespin into a duck. And so we really like this idea that you can look at the same object in different ways and the same shadow in different ways. And so this Shadow Remix project is one where here are just some examples of how we invite people to use different materials to transform a shadow into whatever they see. So it's kind of using these artistic materials to show us what you see in a shadow. So these are a little example reel. And some of it's thinking about the quality of the shadow or the reflection. And so these examples are all analog. So it's using pencil and paper or pen and paper to share what people see. but we also have been using that application, Octa Studio, to animate shadows. So this was a shadow of a hand. And Michael, you made this one, right?
Yeah, yeah. So I took a photo of my hand just like on a white background and just decided to play around with what I could see. And this was one of the things that I was able to see. And then I was able to flip the orientation and see a whole different scene in my head and then manifest it using Octa Studio.
So we really like this idea of using the book Duck Rabbit as an invitation into thinking about light and shadow in a slightly different way. So this was another project where it's using Octa Studio to make first something that looks like a duck and then something that looks like a rabbit. And the idea is you really could share this same project and lots of different people might have the same take or to have different takes on the very same shadow.
And Steph, can I just add, that is a really fun thing to do, is to have an Octa Studio project that you share with someone else. You could do the same thing with a physical printout of a shadow, but that sort of telephone, or how many things can look different, starting with the same starting point. It's nice.
So this is a slightly different take on using Octa Studio with Duck Rabbit. You can, because it's a phone app that takes advantage of it being a mobile device, and a lot of phones have flashlights now, you can actually there's a block where you can say, turn the flashlight on. And so in this project, there's going to be a magnet that activates it. So there's a magnet sensor, and then you can turn the flashlight on. So you'll see a magnet attached to a flashlight that'll activate the project, and then you'll see the light go on. And I wanted to make a duck shadow. So that's just for me, it's always a surprise that with this coding application, you can make something in the real world show up. And we just wanted to share. So with the same book, you can use code, you can use drawing materials, and then we were also playing with what happens if you have a whiteboard and magnets, and what are some other ways that you could be inviting people to look at and to remix the same image. Another book that we really love is called Moonbear's Shadow, which I'm going to invite Michael to tell us a little about.
Yeah, so Moonbear's Shadow is a delightful little story. If you haven't seen it, it's part of a wider Moonbear series about a bear that discovers it has a shadow and I think is not that excited about it and tries to escape its shadow. But we have played around with this book, and this book is an entry point in a few different ways. And I just want to change camera quickly to show you a series of parts that we've created in that relate to Moonbear's Shadow. And so I'll just start off by maybe turning on one light. So we've created these light blocks, which are really just a flashlight we've bought on Amazon that we've embedded in a block of wood. And we really like it because it allows you to like stack things or place light sources next to each other. And we're complementing that with a series of moon bears, which we've just laser cut out of predominantly acrylic, but also some out of plywood. And sorry, the problem with doing something that needs darkness is that we then don't have much light in the room. So we have a range of kind of invitations using the moon bears as starting points. And we chose different material properties. So for example, this clear one, maybe you can't really see it just in this row, but you can clearly see the shadow that it casts on the projection screen. So we find that that's a really interesting thing to kind of be bringing up. The fact that we have a mirror one right next to the clear one, which just casts a solid shadow, but there is actually a mirror reflection hitting somewhere behind me. And so the other thing that we've also looked at, and that we actually saw in an earlier image, is this idea of red, green, and blue lights. And I hope that's kind of coming up on the video. When we have red, green, and blue lights, we're actually able to create a huge array of different colors projected on the screen. It's a really interesting kind of exploration of how many shadows are being cast from one object. So if I take away a bunch of moon bears. We see that, well, I don't know, again, I hope that it's coming up on screen, but there's a range of different shadows being projected, and also the colors that are coming up are maybe not what you'd expect given the fact that we're starting with a red, green, and blue flashlight. There's a lot of other things to do with this book as a starting point that are really interesting to us. We have an experience at the Tinkering Studio that we call light play, and light play looks at, well, playing with light, but a range of different types of like simple materials that can have really cool effects. And it kind of goes back to what Steph was just showing with Shadow Remix around like what can you see in the shadow cast by different everyday objects. So these are a couple of our favorites. This is a strawberry basket. But because it's that grid shape and it's got a bit of depth, the shadow that it casts can be really, really fascinating. And this is a plastic cup, really. It's a crystal cut cup, but it creates these beautiful ripples when light goes through it. I mean, personally, when I see it flooded with blue light or maybe a bit of blue and white light, like it really elicits like a moving water for me. And so that can often be a starting point for a range of other investigations and creations, like narrative driven or aesthetic kind of inspiration points. And then a range of different like flat and film materials. So this is a small sheet of dichroic film. Dichroic film is a really magical thing that I don't really know how it works, but it creates these really lovely colors as light shines through it. Grids as well are fascinating to kind of move light further and backwards and create that sense of depth. I don't want to inundate you with too many different material explorations, but I mean, Steph and Karen, you've played around with this a lot as well. If there's anything else that you wanted to add.
I would just add shining flashlights through things you find around the house and discards is just way more fun than it should be, or that it seems like it would be. Yeah, it's a lot of fun.
Yeah, I've done it just with my college friends when they come to visit me sometimes. Like it works for all ages.
Yeah, and using it up a wall onto the ceiling, you know, shadows grow and can fill rooms, which is fun.
The other thing I might just quickly say, in particular, because during introductions, we heard from a lot of people in makerspaces and similar. I'm going to try and just create a bit more light. We love these particular light blocks, which are just a 2x2x2 block of wood that we've drilled a hole through. And we find it really important to be able to have something that is stable, where the light doesn't just come out. It makes it a little bit less likely that somebody's going to shine the flashlight directly in their eyes. So there's a lot of reasons why we like having the light in a block form. We've been working with some friends in different informal education spaces, in museums, community partners, and obviously in libraries as well. And we're realizing that creating these maybe isn't the easiest thing. So we've also been playing around with making these similar forms out of a range of different materials. So this is laser cut cardboard, which Steph also has an example of on screen. And this one's really lovely. It's got a really great weight to it. It's also pretty solid, like it feels pretty good. Obviously, it maybe won't last as long as a wooden block, but they're pretty cheap and quick and easy to make. It's similar thing, just using acrylic though. This one's really solid and chunky and pretty weighty, surprisingly weighty. And then finally, if you have access to a 3D printer, we also have a 3D printed version that, again, in terms of its function, does the exact same thing. All of these stack and you know, create this like handheld object that's really lovely to interact with. But if you don't have access to, say, woodworking tools, it might be easier to go down that path. And I'll pass back to you, Steph.
Great. Well, so we know that we just shared a lot of different directions with light and shadow. And what we would love to hear from you all in the room is, first, are there any light and shadow books that are just coming to mind as books that you know of or would like to tinker with? And then second, do you already do any activities with light and shadow in your space? Oh, and in the meantime, Bernadette, we can answer, how do you keep the flashlight stable inside the blocks? I mean, Michael, do you want to?
That's a great question. So initially we did try like gluing them or wrapping them with tape to just wedge them in. At the moment on all of them, they're just press fit in such a way that it's very tight. So if I needed to take it out, which I really don't because I can change the battery just by taking off the back, I could just tap it out with like a mallet. So at the moment they're press fit, but if they were a bit too loose, we'd just wrap some tape and also just force them in there so that they're not going to come out on the floor.
Yeah, and feel free to drop books in the chat too. This is great to see some of them coming up. Does anyone do light and shadow activities in their spaces right now? I'm just curious. Oh, great. So John is saying you have optical lens exploration kits in your space with big handheld lenses, and you offer the kids flashlights to shine through them, but encourage them to walk around the room to look at different objects through the lenses to see what they look like. That's really cool. Oh, and lots of under the table activities too. That has come up as a way to make a dark space, is to go underneath a table. I love that. Oh yeah, and Bernadette talking about making stick puppets that the kids make out of popsicle sticks and paper shapes and shining lights that way.
Also, yeah, using the bottom of the table, I think I've seen some instances of that, which is really cool, and things can be floating, and also maybe if they're on string, they've got a bit of motion.
Well, with that, we're really hoping that between now and the next session, which is on May 15th, 14th, 15th?
15th, May 15th.
On May 15th, well, we're hoping that we'll come back together and to share out whatever you want to try around tinkering with books about light and shadow, and then materials that have to do with light and shadow. So we shared some examples here. It's definitely not all of the books you might use and all the materials you might use. If you have anything, any questions that come up throughout too, will be on the Library Makers platform. So we can share files, we can share pictures of some of these materials again. So if you have ideas that you're trying out, we would love to see the works in progress too. But our hope is that we'll all spend some time tinkering with light and shadow and physical materials in our spaces. Are there any comments or questions before I turn it over to Karen from San Diego to wrap us up? Great. Well, Karen, do you want to?
Sure, I'll do a quick wrap up. Yes, I just want to echo what someone, I think Trisha, said in the chat. Feeling very inspired right now. So many great examples. I have some things working in my head right now, like photography comes to mind. So anyways, very inspired. So thank you for showing us all those examples. And if you can also share those, the name of the artists you shared as well, that would be great. So just a few things in our wrap up. First, if you could fill out that very, very short survey that I put in the chat, we would love to hear your feedback and also what you would be interested in for the future. So that would be really helpful for us. And then also our next session will be on May 15th. That's a Wednesday. So feel free to sign up for that in our events section on our Library Makers platform. And then between now and then, you can keep the discussion going by posting on that newsfeed section. You can share posts and ask questions, and please use the post, the hashtag Storytime Tinkering. That way we can all find each other in our discussions. All right, well, that's it for the wrap up. I thank you all for coming today, and I'm really excited to see what we all come up with.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you all. See you next time.
Great.
Great. I'm going to stop the recording.